It was one of those mornings when the world feels heavier than usual. January 12, 2007. The air was so cold it burned my lungs every time I breathed. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens after a heavy snow, where everything looks calm but feels frozen in time. I was running late for work, so I decided to take the shortcut through the alley behind the old train station, a place I usually avoided because of the smell of garbage and wet concrete. I almost didn't hear it at first. It was faint, like a soft squeak or a weak meow. I stopped walking, thinking maybe it was a stray cat stuck somewhere. But then I heard it again, a sharp, fragile cry that didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. My stomach tightened. That's when I saw the box. It was an old cardboard box, collapsed a little on one side from the weight of the melting snow. It didn't look like much, just trash someone had left behind. But when I stepped closer, I saw the blanket. Pink. Thin. And moving. I froze. For a moment, my mind couldn't even process what my eyes were seeing. There, inside that box, was a baby. Her tiny face was red from the cold, her lips trembling, and her little hands were flailing in the air, trying to find warmth that wasn't there. She couldn't have been more than a few days old. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around, expecting to see someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. But the alley was empty. Just me, the snow, and this baby in a box. I didn't think. I just moved. I knelt down, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I touched her cheek, and she stopped crying for a second, like she could sense I was there. She was so cold. Too cold. I pulled off my coat and wrapped her in it, pressing her close to my chest. I remember whispering, it's okay, you're safe now," over and over, even though I had no idea if that was true. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I told them what I'd found. The dispatcher kept me on the line, telling me to stay where I was, that help was on the way. But those minutes felt like hours. I kept checking her little face, terrified that if I looked away for even a second, something bad would happen. I don't know why, but in that moment, everything else in my life, my job, my bills, my own problems, just disappeared. There was only her. When the sirens finally broke through the quiet, relief hit me so hard I almost cried. The paramedics rushed over, their voices calm but urgent. They took her from my arms, wrapped her in a thermal blanket, and carried her to the ambulance. I stood there, frozen, watching as they drove away. My hands were empty, but they were still shaking. For a long moment, I just stood there in that alley, staring at the wet cardboard box on the ground. The snow kept falling, light and quiet, covering the spot where she had been. I didn't know it then, but that cold January morning would stay with me for the rest of my life. That night, the story was everywhere. Good Samaritan saves abandoned newborn, that's what the local news called me. They even showed my face on TV, which I hated. I wasn't a hero. I was just a man who happened to walk down the wrong alley at the right time. But people didn't care. For a few days, everyone wanted to talk to me. My phone didn't stop ringing, reporters, neighbors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. At work, they treated me like I'd done something extraordinary. My boss clapped me on the back, coworkers called me the baby guy, and strangers came up to me in the grocery store just to shake my hand. But none of that mattered. The only thing I wanted to know was if she was okay. I kept calling the hospital for updates, and every time, my chest tightened until the nurse reassured me, she was stable, she was warm, she was safe. They told me she had no serious health issues, which felt like a miracle after the freezing hours she'd spent in that box. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I barely slept that first week, lying in bed replaying the moment I picked her up, the way her tiny hand had brushed against my jacket as if she was holding on to me. I kept wondering what would have happened if I'd decided to take my usual route that morning. Would anyone have found her in time? A couple of days later, a detective came by to take my statement. He asked me everything, what time I'd found her, if I'd seen anyone nearby, if I'd noticed anything suspicious. I told him the truth, the alley was empty. Just me, the snow, and the baby. He said they were trying to find the mother, but I could tell by the way his voice softened that they didn't have much to go on. No cameras in that part of town, no witnesses. Just a plain cardboard box and a pink blanket. The day after that, I saw her picture for the first time. The local station ran a short update, Baby Jane, they called her. They showed a blurry photo of her in the hospital, a tiny face wrapped up in white blankets. I sat there staring at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. She looked so small, so fragile. And for reasons I couldn't explain, seeing her face made everything feel even more real. People around town started talking. Some were outraged, angry at whoever had left her there. Others were full of sympathy, saying maybe her mother had been desperate, scared, with nowhere to turn. I didn't know what to think. All I knew was that someone had abandoned her, and that thought made my chest ache in a way I couldn't describe. Weeks passed, and slowly the world moved on. The reporters stopped calling. The neighbors stopped asking for details. But for me, nothing felt over. One morning, I got a call from a social worker. She wanted to thank me personally for what I'd done. She said the baby had been placed in temporary foster care and that they were beginning the process to find her a permanent home. "She's a fighter," the woman told me, her voice warm. "She's eating well, gaining weight. She's going to be just fine." I should have felt relieved. And in a way, I did. But there was something else too, this strange, heavy feeling in my chest that I couldn't quite name. I wanted to ask more questions, to know more about where she was, who she'd be with, what her life would look like. But I didn't. I didn't think I had the right. Instead, I just thanked her for the update, hung up the phone, and sat there in my empty kitchen staring at nothing. The following weekend, I walked past the train station again. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought I'd find something I'd missed, a clue, a sign, anything to explain how a baby ended up in that box. But the alley was quiet, empty, like nothing had ever happened there. Only I knew the truth of what that place had held. And yet, life went on. People forgot. The headlines faded. But every time I saw a pink blanket in a store window, or heard the sound of a baby crying in the distance, my mind went right back to that cold morning. To her. Insert no video to form a natural. If you're new here and want to hear more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel. You won't regret it. Even now, looking back, I think that was when it started, that invisible thread connecting me to her. I didn't know her name, didn't know where she'd end up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that, somehow, our lives were tied together. I told myself it would fade, that time would dull it. But deep down, I think I always knew the truth. This was only the beginning. Life didn't stop that day, even though a part of me wished it had. Bills still needed to be paid, work still demanded my time, and the world around me quickly forgot about the baby in the box. But I didn't. I couldn't. The first year after finding her was the hardest. Every time I walked by a park or a playground, I'd imagine her there, a tiny girl with dark hair and bright eyes, running around, laughing, calling out for someone. I didn't know what her real name was, but in my mind, I called her Little One. It felt strange, caring so deeply for someone I'd only known for a few minutes, but that morning had left a mark I couldn't erase. Every January, on the anniversary of that day, I'd find myself back in that alley behind the train station. The city eventually cleaned up the graffiti, patched the broken bricks, and fixed the old lights, but to me, it always looked the same. Quiet. Cold. Like time had stopped. I'd stand there for a few minutes, hands in my pockets, and whisper, "I hope you're okay," as if she could somehow hear me. I thought about reaching out to the adoption agency, asking if I could know where she'd gone or if she was happy. But I never did. I told myself it wasn't my place. She wasn't mine, and she deserved a life without some stranger from her past hanging around. Still, that didn't stop me from wondering. Years went by. I got a better job, moved to a quieter neighborhood, and tried to settle into a simple routine. But she was always there, in the back of my mind. Sometimes, I'd dream about her. In those dreams, she was older, maybe 7 or 8, standing in the same alley, looking up at me with big, trusting eyes. She never spoke in those dreams, but I always woke up with my heart pounding and this strange, heavy feeling in my chest. I remember one night, maybe 10 years after that morning, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching the steam rise, and wondering if she ever thought about the man who found her. Probably not. She had her own life, her own family. Maybe she was happy, maybe she wasn't, but either way, I was just a face in a story she'd heard once, maybe twice. Still, I couldn't let go of the idea that, in some strange way, our lives were connected. Like there was an invisible thread between us that time and distance couldn't break. There were moments when the thought of her hit me out of nowhere. A little girl laughing in the supermarket. A pink blanket hanging in the window of a store. a father holding his daughter's hand while crossing the street. Each time, my chest tightened, and I'd find myself wondering what she looked like, what kind of person she was becoming. I started keeping a small box in my closet. Inside it, I placed the old newspaper clipping from the day after I found her, a blurry screenshot of her photo from the hospital, and a copy of the thank you letter I'd received from the social worker. I never told anyone about the box. It felt like my own way of keeping her close, even if she was somewhere far away, living a life I knew nothing about. As the years passed, the visits to the alley became less frequent, but the thoughts never truly went away. I told myself to move on, to focus on my own life, but every January, like clockwork, that ache in my chest returned. It didn't fade. It just settled there, a quiet reminder of a single morning that had changed everything. Friends would sometimes joke that I was too quiet, too serious. They didn't know. I never talked about her. Not once. It felt too personal, too sacred, like sharing it would somehow cheapen what had happened. And then, one night, about 15 years after I'd found her, I had a dream that was different from all the others. In this one, she wasn't a child. She was older, maybe a teenager, standing in front of me with tears in her eyes. And this time, she spoke. She said, "Thank you." I woke up shaking, my heart racing. I didn't know what it meant, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. I didn't know it then, but those quiet years, the waiting, the wondering, were leading to something. Something I could never have prepared for. It was a quiet evening, one of those nights when nothing feels unusual. I'd just finished dinner and was sitting on the couch, half watching a game on TV, when my phone buzzed. At first, I didn't even look at it. Probably another spam text or some random notification. But then it buzzed again, and something made me pick it up. The message was short. So short that it didn't even make sense at first. "Hi, my name is Emily. I think you're the man who found me when I was a baby." I read it 3 times, my brain refusing to connect the words into something real. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of scam, some cruel joke. People on the internet did strange things all the time. But before I could even process what I was feeling, another message came through. It was a picture. A photo of a little girl, maybe around 6 years old, holding a pink baby blanket. The same blanket I'd seen that cold January morning, the one I'd watched a paramedic wrap her in before the ambulance doors closed. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I couldn't breathe. For 18 years, I'd wondered where she was, what her life was like, if she was even okay. And now, out of nowhere, here she was, reaching out to me. I didn't know what to say. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting words that felt too small for the moment. Finally, I sent the only thing that made sense. "Yes. I'm Em." She replied almost instantly. She told me her name, Emily. She explained that a year ago, her parents had told her the truth about her adoption. They had always planned to, but they wanted her to be old enough to understand. When they finally sat her down and told her the story, she said she felt a strange pull to know more about where she'd come from. She didn't want to find her birth mother, at least not yet. But she wanted to find me. The man who had found her in that box and called for help. The man, she said, who had given her a chance at life. I just stared at her words, my vision blurring as tears filled my eyes. She told me she had spent months trying to track me down. It wasn't easy, there hadn't been much information about me in the news. But she'd found the old article online and eventually used social media to find my name. From there, it had taken time, patience, and a little luck, but she'd found me. "I don't want to bother you," she wrote. "I just wanted to say thank you. And, if you're okay with it, I'd really like to meet you." I sat there in silence, the room spinning around me. My mind raced with every thought imaginable. What if she regretted finding me? What if I said the wrong thing? What if I wasn't the person she'd been hoping to find? But then I thought about all the years I'd spent wondering if she was safe, if she was happy. I thought about the quiet visits to that alley every January, the dreams where she was always out of reach. And I knew. I typed back, my hands still trembling, but my heart clear. "I would love to meet you. Anytime. Anywhere." For a few seconds, there was nothing. Just silence. And then her reply lit up my screen. "Okay. Let's meet. I've waited my whole life for this." I sat there, my phone in my hand, my heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. 18 years of wondering, of quiet longing, of unanswered questions, and suddenly, all of it was leading to this moment. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her messages over and over. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the invisible thread I'd felt pulling at me all those years didn't feel so heavy. For the first time, it felt like it was pulling me home. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, one of those quiet places where the hum of soft music blends with the smell of coffee and baked bread. I got there almost half an hour early, my nerves so bad that my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I kept wiping them on my jeans, checking my phone, looking at the door every time it opened. I'd imagined this moment for 18 years, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. Every what if played in my mind. What if she took one look at me and regretted finding me? What if she thought I'd been avoiding her all these years? What if she asked me questions I didn't know how to answer? Then the door opened, and I saw her. Emily. She walked in, scanning the room, and when her eyes met mine, I knew instantly. She didn't look like the little baby I'd carried in my arms that cold morning, but there was something in her face, her eyes, the way she tilted her head, that I recognized deep in my soul. I stood up, and before I could even speak, she smiled. Not just a polite smile, but one that felt warm, familiar, almost like it had been waiting for me. She walked toward me, and without hesitation, wrapped her arms around me. For a moment, I froze, caught off guard. And then something inside me broke loose. 18 years of wondering, of aching, of imagining, and now, here she was, real and alive and hugging me like I mattered. We sat down, and for a while, neither of us knew what to say. I kept staring at her, trying to memorize every detail, the way her dark hair framed her face, the tiny scar near her eyebrow, the nervous way she twisted the straw in her drink. She was grown up now, confident but shy, with a quiet strength that reminded me of someone who'd been through more than most but still found a way to smile. She started talking first. She told me about her family, how her parents had adopted her when she was just a baby, how they'd raised her in a small town not too far away, how she'd grown up surrounded by love but always felt a quiet curiosity about where she'd come from. She said her parents were supportive of her finding me, even helping her track down that old news article from the day I found her. When she thanked me, her voice broke just a little. "You didn't just save me," she said. "You gave me the chance to have a life. To have them. To be me." I didn't know how to respond. My throat tightened, and all I could do was shake my head and whisper, "I'm just glad you're here." She asked me about that morning. What it was like. What I'd felt when I saw her there. I told her everything, the quiet alley, the sound of her cry, the way the world seemed to stop when I saw her in that box. I told her about how terrified I was that I'd be too late, and how, in that moment, all I could think about was keeping her warm and alive until help came. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I think about that a lot," she said softly. "How different things could have been if you hadn't been there. I wouldn't even be here." We talked for hours. About life, about the years we'd spent not knowing each other, about the strange connection we both admitted we'd felt but never understood. I told her how I'd gone back to that alley every year, how I'd kept the old news clipping and the hospital photo. She smiled and said she always believed she'd find me someday, that something in her heart told her our paths would cross again. At one point, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You know," she said, "I've spent my whole life wondering who I was before I became Emily. And now, I think I finally know. I'm the girl you didn't give up on." I couldn't hold back the tears then. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the ache I'd carried in my chest started to ease. When it was time to leave, neither of us wanted to say goodbye. So we didn't. We hugged again, tighter this time, and she promised to call me soon. As I watched her walk away, my heart felt full in a way I hadn't thought possible. I'd found her once in a box, fragile and cold, fighting to stay alive. And now, 18 years later, she'd found me, and in some way, she'd saved me too. A few weeks after that first meeting, Emily called me. I remember the sound of her voice that night, quieter than usual, a little shaky, like she was carrying something heavy. I asked her if everything was okay, and after a long pause, she said she had found her birth mother. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me had wondered about that woman for years, who she was, why she'd made that choice, if she ever thought about the baby she'd left behind. Now, Emily was about to give me answers I'd never expected to have. She told me her birth mother's name was Rachel. She had been barely 19 when Emily was born. She'd been living out of her car, no family willing to help, no job, and nowhere to go. Emily's father had left the moment he found out about the pregnancy. She'd been alone, scared, and desperate. And one freezing night in January, she made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She told me, Emily said softly, that she thought someone would find me quickly. That maybe she couldn't be the mother I needed, but someone else could. She said she never stopped thinking about me, not for a single day. I sat there in silence, the weight of those words pressing down on me. I had spent years imagining her as a cruel, heartless person, someone who could abandon a child without a second thought. But hearing Emily's voice, hearing the pain and confusion mixed with forgiveness, I realized I had been wrong. Rachel wasn't a monster. She was a scared kid who didn't see any other way. She cried when she saw me, Emily continued. She said she never forgave herself. She wanted to, but she couldn't. Anne. I told her I forgave her. Those words hit me hard. Forgiveness is something most of us talk about, but to actually give it, to look someone in the eye who changed your entire life and say, I forgive you, that takes a kind of strength I'm not sure I'll ever fully understand. I asked Emily how she felt about it all. She was quiet for a moment before saying, it's complicated. But I think I needed to know where I came from. And now I do. It doesn't change who I am. It just fills in the empty spaces. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. About the girl she'd been back then, alone in the cold, making an impossible choice. And about the woman she was now, living with the memory of that choice every single day. I found myself feeling something I hadn't expected, compassion. Not anger. Not judgment. Just a deep, quiet sadness for everything she must have gone through. Emily met her a few more times, slowly building something fragile but real. She told me about those meetings, about how Rachel would bring old pictures, about the way she'd stare at Emily like she was afraid she'd disappear if she blinked. She told me, Emily said one evening, that you're the reason she's been able to sleep at night for the past 18 years. Knowing someone found me. That I survived. I didn't know what to do with that. I wasn't looking for gratitude, not then and not now. But hearing that my small act, just stopping, just picking up a box, had given someone even a little peace, it humbled me in a way I can't explain. In time, I realized that what Emily had found wasn't just her past, she'd found her strength. She told me she wanted to use her story to help other kids who felt abandoned, kids who needed to know that being left behind didn't mean they were unworthy of love. And as she spoke about her plans, her voice steady and full of purpose, I realized something else. The little baby I'd found in that alley wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. Always had been. That night, after we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, thinking about how life can twist and turn in ways you can't predict. How a single moment, a single choice to take a different route, to stop and listen, can change everything. For 18 years, I'd carried that morning like a weight on my shoulders. But now, hearing the truth, seeing the way Emily had turned pain into strength, that weight felt lighter. Maybe it wasn't just fate that led me to that alley. Maybe it was something bigger, something that wanted her to live, to grow, to forgive, to find her voice. And maybe, in some way I'll never fully understand, it wanted me to be there, too. I've replayed that night in my head 1,000 times. The way my hands trembled as I opened the box, the way my heart pounded when I first read her letter, the way my voice cracked when I said her name after all those years. And every time I think about it, I realize how little I understood back then about what it meant to really forgive, to really love someone despite the pain they caused. After the truth came out, about my mother, about why she left, about the lies that kept us apart, I thought closure would come quickly. I imagined some neat ending, like in the movies, where everyone hugs, tears are shed, and life magically feels whole again. But that's not how life works. Healing isn't instant. It's messy, it's slow, and sometimes, it feels impossible. For a while, I was angry. Angry at her for leaving, angry at my father for his silence, angry at myself for all the years I spent hating a woman who never stopped loving me. I carried that anger like a weight, pretending I was fine, telling everyone I had moved on. But then I'd see her handwriting in those letters, or hear her laugh in my memories, and the weight would pull me down again. It took time, months of quiet moments, sitting alone with her words, reading and rereading the pieces of her life she'd left behind. Letters about how she used to sit by the window on my birthday, waiting for a call that never came. Notes about the first time she saw me take my first steps. Stories about the night she cried herself to sleep, wondering if I hated her. Those letters broke me in ways I didn't think I could be broken. But they also stitched me back together, piece by piece, because they showed me something I hadn't seen before. Her pain was as real as mine. She wasn't the villain I thought she was. She was human, flawed, scared, and trying her best in a situation that felt impossible. When we finally started talking again, there were long silences on those calls. Sometimes we didn't even talk about the past. Sometimes it was just her telling me about the garden she'd started, or me complaining about my job. But those moments meant more than I can explain. They weren't just conversations, they were bridges, carefully built between years of distance and misunderstanding. The last time I saw her, I hugged her like I was afraid to let go. And maybe I was. Because some part of me knew that time was running out, that we wouldn't get decades together to make up for what we'd lost. But in that moment, I also knew something else. She was proud of me. Not for the job I had, or the house I bought, or any of those surface things. She was proud because, despite everything, I came back. When she passed, it hurt in a way I can't put into words. It was a sharp, hollow pain, like losing her twice. But this time, it wasn't filled with anger. This time, I let myself grieve the woman she truly was, the mother who loved me, even from a distance, even when everything in her world told her not to. Now, when I think about her, it's not just about the years we lost. It's about the moments we found in the time we had left. The late-night phone calls. The way her voice cracked when she told me she loved me. The small smile on her face when I called her mom again, after so many years of silence. What I know now is that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to see the whole picture, to let love weigh more than pain. I'll never get those lost years back. But I can carry her forward with me, in the stories she told, in the lessons she taught me without even realizing it, in the quiet strength she showed when the world had turned its back on her. Sometimes, when I walk past the shelf where I keep that old box, I stop and run my hand along the lid. I think about everything that box held, not just the letters and photos, but the chance it gave me to know the truth, to see her for who she really was. And I think about how different my life would be if I'd never opened it. She used to write, "One day, you'll understand." Now, I do.